A goal of Rick and Morty Season 8 seems to be rebuilding the status quo as we head into a brand new era of the series. The first episode showed us the kind of people Morty and Summer are capable of becoming under dire circumstances, showcasing Rick's influence on both of his grandkids. This week, we're completely switching things up with the Galactic Federation as they're now allies of the Smith family, something that may seem small at first, but may actually factor into the next chapter of the Evil Morty saga. Also, we've gotten a proper introduction of the woman who's shaping up to be Rick's next love interest. This is also the first episode without any Morty whatsoever, which was done for a specific reason. Lots to talk about, so let's waste no time and break down Valkyrick. This episode has given us another way to differentiate the two Beths, as the Defiance refers to Space Beth as Beth Sanchez, instead of Beth Smith like in previous appearances, which is actually a pretty layered decision by the writers. In universe, keeping her surname makes sense as when Beth was cloned, she was still divorced and had yet to get back together with Jerry. But from a meta level, this also emphasizes how this is a Beth who was following in her father's footsteps, even though, ironically enough, she's also the Beth who's holding Rick's failings as a father against him instead of trying to move forward. Also, this episode is a huge step in mending their relationship as her arc is centered around accepting help from Rick and acknowledging how much he's taken after him.
Oh god, I'm turning into my father.
That's all you had to say, partner.
The roster of the Defiance consists of some relatively new faces, like Corsica, who first appeared in Season 7's Rick Fending Your Mort, but is taking on a bigger role here. And we see a lot of the same members from his previous appearance, like the girl Squanchy and BugAnne. Their base is also now underwater like the Hall of Doom or C-Lab, but you could chalk that up to the Defiance needing to relocate to throw the Federation off their trail. The Defiance has become very bureaucratized, and they're struggling to get anything meaningful done. Case in point, they've spent months trying to approve a plan to assassinate the Queen Gromflomite when she could have been bug paste already. They want to bring about change across the galaxy, yet are too busy fighting amongst themselves and needing approval on every little thing to actually do anything. Nothing gets done. It's ironic that a group of rebels need approval and micromanage to an excessive degree. I understand they need to have some kind of order so rebels way less skilled than Beth don't blindly run off into battle and make things worse, but this is too much. So just like how Rick would find himself to be above all of these petty politics and put matters into his own hands, Space Beth jumps the gun and decides to assassinate the Queen without approval from the Defiance, effortlessly turn through the Gromflomites, only to discover that the Queen was already dead? And apparently, it was an inside job. Although the Defiance chalks all of this up to being Beth's fault, this really does highlight how flawed their system is. Not only did they waste months bickering over a plan to assassinate the Queen and let someone else beat them to the punch, but you're telling me that there was someone else within the Federation who wanted the Queen dead, and that just completely flew under their radar? Considering Rick actually has a few connections with Gromflomites that we see in this episode, it's embarrassing that the rebellion couldn't have formed any connections of their own that may have been able to revive them with the information that Beth and Rick obtained throughout this episode. And considering how Beth, Rick, and the Smith family were the only ones to net some notable W's against the Federation all throughout the series, I can safely say that without Beth, the Defiance is largely useless. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After realizing she's stranded on the mothership and the Defiance apparently can't approve of rescuing Beth without an emergency meeting, she reluctantly calls Rick for help, and she's surprised to see that he comes to her aid without any pushback. No snark or insane request. He just wants to be there for his daughter. Although Space Beth is surprised that her father would drop everything to come rescue her, it makes perfect sense to me. And it's the same reason why I believe Morty was benched from this particular episode. Where Beth sees a crisis, Rick sees a golden opportunity. The chance to do something he's always longed for, but missed out on thanks to Rick Prime murdering his original family. In this episode, Rick is finally able to go on an adventure with his daughter. Earth Beth never really seemed interested in going on adventures the same way Morty or Summer have. And a lot of fans have always had the interpretation that Rick likes adventuring with his grandkids since he wasn't able to with his Beth as she never made it to her teenage years. This is more than Rick wanting to stay in his space daughter's good graces after a rocky couple of years. Or, months? I don't know, the passage of time in this show is confusing. Someone started watching this show when they were 14, being the same age as Morty, and in a couple of years, they'll be 28, while Morty will still be 14. We see how Rick kind of manipulates his way into turning a favor for his daughter into a whole-ass adventure. At first, he's just supposed to drop her off outside the Defiance base, only to portal the two of them into the middle of the conference room and make his presence known. Then Rick's supposed to just drop Beth off at the apartment of an insect supremacist arms dealer so that that she can interrogate him, only to join her on said interrogation. From here, Beth stops trying to get rid of him and accepts that he's along for the ride. I appreciated seeing just how much Rick adores Space Beth. He really does love her just as much as the one on Earth. He's quick to jump to her defense when the Defiance chastises her for fumbling the assassination, even though she really didn't. It's not her fault someone else beat her to the punch. They're just mad she was done waiting around for them to make a decision, and they get to justify throwing her under the bus thanks to the Federation's apparent inside job and cover-up, replacing the Queen with a robot. It's also funny how much Rick detests Beth being a Nepo baby. It's the perfect kind of insult that would hurt Beth and Rick, because neither of them are getting behind the idea that Rick's family is going places solely off of his name rather than their own talents. It's a sentiment that goes against their big conversation in the ABCs of Beth and the reason why Beth cloned herself in the first place. Yet at the same time, it's a little funny this comment got under Rick's skin, because even though Beth made a name for herself throughout these space adventures, Rick did set this all in motion in the first place. Beth never would have ventured out into space if it wasn't for him. Circling back to BugAnne, it appears that she and Rick may have a thing going on, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's either a past fling that he's still into, or someone he's been pining for, and is only now finally able to get closer to. BugAnne was a member of the Defiance since Bird Person and Rick's hero days, and is more or less one of Rick's war buddies, so there's some pretty significant history here. She isn't just one of Space Beth's co-workers, as this episode alone would lead you to believe. She knows that Rick wants to hook up with her, but she may have had a certain image of him that had Rick in the doghouse. I could see BugAnne having some chemistry back in the day with Rick, but ultimately being soured by his refusal to work with others. So seeing Rick team up with his daughter after standing up for her in front of the Defiance and make meaningful change is very attractive to her. Not only does she see substantial growth within Rick, but she recognizes a man who's trying his best to be a good father. Between the show's habit of bringing back their newer characters a season or two later, and the fact that this definitely won't be the last we see of the Defiance, I'm expecting BugAnne to pop up in the future and date Rick for at least an episode, much to Beth's annoyance. Reconnecting with someone you are in the literal trenches with doesn't feel like something Rick and Morty would just drop. They've been consistent about keeping around the characters who were involved in this chapter of Rick's life. I also don't think it's a coincidence that they finally decided to name her in this episode, only to give her a name that's close to Diane, just with Bug instead of Di. Although the humor in this episode was pretty hit or miss, the Rick and Morty team still knows how to keep things fresh in other areas, as the arms dealer interrogation with Rick and Beth taking turns dropping him into portals felt like a clever use of the portal gun. It's also horrifying, as you never know if the portals will start dropping you into new dimensions, or they're going to disappear, causing you to fall to your death, like with the arms dealer. There's a lot of ways that can go down, and I'm glad the writers remember that the portal gun can be a pretty scary thing in the wrong hands. The interrogation takes him to the lair of Fantabulous, the former royal doctor and medical officer of the Federation, who was utilizing a fungus as a super soldier serum. Like The Last of Us, but if instead of turning to a zombie, you got really jacked and hulked out. Fantabulous describes the fungus as a highly evolved symbiote with the goal of galactic domination, so they're kind of on the same page there. This means that the fungus is another hive mind in the series, behind Unity, and although they create the cure to the fungus in this episode, I can see it coming back into play down the road in a scenario where the fungus is actually pit against Unity. How could one influence the other? These are the questions I want to see some answers to by the time we hit season 12. It's interesting to get a Gromflomite's point of view on their short lifespans, as Fantabulous views it as their biggest problem, with the fungus serving as a solution, infecting as much of the population as possible, which will enhance their bodies as they're assimilated into the hive mind and force future generations to evolve. Rick has always viewed the Gromflomite's short lifespans and fast breeding as a nuisance for the rest of the galaxy, because it enables the Gromflomites to keep coming back no matter how fast they're killed. It's why we've had multiple iterations of the Federation. You can't keep them down for too long. The Queen didn't agree with Fantabulous's plan to infect the masses, so we had her killed and replaced with a robot who would get the job done for him, before unleashing a nest of infected Gromflomites upon the planet. Pretty straightforward plan. I wasn't big on this episode's use of modern slang. The repeated use of rent-free and Beth saying stuff like get the W in, his brain is cooked. It's not like the show can't make these things work, but it came off as pretty try-hard and unnatural, especially with Beth's delivery. It felt like Sarah Chalk was recording these lines at gunpoint.
This guy's brain is cooked.
The sequence of Rick and Beth discussing their plan while we see it go horribly wrong was really great. It is by far the best scene in this episode. It's a great spin on these kind of jokes where the characters discuss an elaborate plan, and instead of the flawless execution that's envisioned, it immediately falls apart when put into action. The Cisco bit was also hilarious, having this guy that's apparently Rick's right-hand man who he puts a lot of trust in, yet Rick can't even tell him apart from the other Gromflomites. And despite Rick's praises, he doesn't even show up because he was on a bender. Rick and Morty is no stranger to jokes that boil down to Rick having an emotional investment in some random guy we've never seen before or barely remember, yet they manage to crack me up every time. I don't think a lot of people view Rick as a loner anymore, but it's still amusing to see how wide his social circle really is. Although humans can't contract the fungus by inhaling the spores, they can still be infected through physical contact, as Space Beth is infected after being impaled by a horn and slowly begins mutating into an ultra Gromflomite. Luckily, a human infection paves the way for a truce between the Federation and the Defiance, as now both sides are in need of a cure. Rick gets the thumbs up to take advantage of the Gromflomite short lifespans and experiment on countless space flies to perfect the vaccine, while also putting a dangerous voice clip in the hands of the internet.
I mean, if I gotta be fascist.
Twitter's gonna have a field day with that one. The truce paves the way for an exciting third act where the Gromflomites, Rick, Space Beth, Bird Person, and Bird Daughter all come together to take out a spore-infused hive of Gromflomites that will emerge and usher in the superior race Fantabulous envisions. I wish we got more Bird Person and Bird Daughter in this episode, as Bird Person is in the same boat as Rick with wanting to bond with his daughter and make up for lost time. The Bird family lending a helping hand also goes a long way in amending Rick and Bird Person's friendship, as Rick is doing Bird Person a solid by helping him connect with his daughter after Rick hid her existence from him. I was pretty amused by the Gromflomites being scared shitless by Bird Daughter. It tracks, since she was very violent in one of their prisons, beating the hell out of prisoners that were 3 times her size. They're fully aware she's going to become a problem on the same level as her father, and they don't want any of that smoke. Love to see that she's already making a name for herself, though I was surprised to see that Bird Person was willing to work with the Federation, given that they roboticized him with the whole Phoenix Person debacle and locked up his daughter, but I guess you could argue that was mostly Tammy's doing, and given the circumstances, it's worth letting bygones be bygones. Still, some acknowledgement would have been nice. Once again, this is a pretty straightforward episode. The gang successfully kills Fantabulous and stops the hive mind, with the Federation honoring their word and committing to change. Beth gets her job back, and peace is declared between the two parties, which raises the question of how things would be looking from here on out. The Federation General says they can change, but how? Are they going to relinquish any control they have over planets? Are they going to try to improve the quality of life on planets without forcing them to join their empire? We need more specifics than what we're given here. Do we still need a Defiance if the group they're opposing has turned a new leaf? Well, I have a theory. These two will team up down the road to stop the one and only Evil Morty. He's already warned Rick and Morty to stay out of his way, threatening to bust out the Omega device. And I think a situation where Rick inadvertently ends up on Evil Morty's bad side by supporting his daughter makes a lot of sense. Evil Morty is definitely planning something big, so would it feel like a good way to bring all these plot threads together, especially if Beth is the next one to go into the Omega device. Would that erase every Beth across the multiverse if the clone ends up getting tossed in, or would only the clone get erased? It would be a genius but tragic way to reveal which one is really the clone. Overall, this was a solid episode. Again, the jokes were a mixed bag, lots of cringe, but lots of moments that I think will stand out amongst fans for years to come. I'm really excited for the next episode, as it reintroduces the Citadel into the fold. If any episode's gonna deliver, I have a feeling it'll be that one. But as always, these are just my thoughts on the episode, and I want to hear yours. What do you think lies in store for the future of the Galactic Federation? Let us know in the comments down below, and keep the conversation going on Twitter and Instagram at AltricVox and at Roundtable Vids. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe to the Roundtable for more great cartoon content. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. Peace!